Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Fantasy Football Playmakers podcast. This is Ryan Mackey, who you can find on Twitter at Mackey_FFB. I apologize. We had some technical difficulties. I am kind of new to running this by myself, so I didn't know that certain things only appear if you have a guest with you or if you have a share screen thing going on. So I apologize for that. I said I was going to be going live around 8:15 today. So about 15 minutes late, it was on chat with the guys from StreamYard, and they were able to help me out relatively quickly once I got everything situated. So apologize for that. It's week 8. We're already on to week 8. It's kind of crazy that this used to be the halfway point in the year, but now we're kind of we get that extra week. So now we're just kind of waiting for all the buys to get through, even though I think the last bye week is week 14, I believe. So hopefully you guys got through week 7. Week 7 was a huge one, I know, for me personally. And I know a lot of people had start-sit questions that involved guys that were on buys and or because they had a lot of guys on buys and things like that. But so I just want to get into things that are going on Twitter. I reached out seeing if there's anything that you guys wanted to hear about, see if there's anything you guys wanted to have me talk about. And I did get a couple responses, so I just want to touch on that first. That way, if you guys are watching the live stream, we don't have to wait too long for that. At Boyd's on Twitter asks, what is going on with Allen Robinson? And I feel like that is a very fair question. I myself have a ton of shares of Allen Robinson. I know a lot of people that had really high hopes for him, including myself. I know they felt like Justin Fields was going to be his saving grace or his guy that was going to be the best quarterback that he's played with. And that might still be true. I'm not really sold on calling him a bust yet, but it hasn't looked great. Just 40 targets, second on the team, averaging less than 6 per game, struggling with drops, including at least 1 touchdown. So he could have a better overall standing in terms of where he's at with wide receivers, but it has not looked good. And honestly, he's just looked disinterested. He didn't want to be in Chicago as it was. I didn't see anything come out publicly, but it's unlikely that he was happy with receiving the franchise tag again. And now that they aren't winning and he's not really involved or producing, he definitely isn't a fan now. He seems to be showing a lack of explosive route running and doesn't always seem to finish his routes or fully block when asked to. He doesn't really seem into it. I know the QB transitions haven't been easy. I know he went from the beginning of the year, it was Andy Dalton, and now it's moved on to Justin Fields. And the lack of rapport with Fields is very evident. Mooney seems to be his favorite target, and Mooney is younger and obviously in a longer-term contract, so they want to get him involved in that offense. Just some important stats that popped to me when I was looking at things compared to last year and how they look. So they're passing a lot less as a team. This year, they're currently at 25.7 pass attempts per game through week 7. Last season, they were at 38.4, so almost over a 13 pass attempt drop on a per game basis. So that doesn't help anything. His catchable targets for this year are currently sitting at 75%, and all these stats are according to Player Profiler. So you can go check those out for yourself if you want. Like I said, catchable targets 75% this season as opposed to 82.1% from last year. His QBR when targeted is sitting at 74 right now, and last year was at 92.3. This season, 0.85 yards per target separation. Last season, it was sitting at 1.41 to end the year, and his yards per target are also down 6.3 this year to 8.3 last year. So you see relatively dramatic decreases in statistical categories that are important for a wide receiver to be effective and to be useful in fantasy football. And the fact that they are passing so little, his catchable ball rate's down, QBR when target is down, target separation is down. Like I said, I think that has a lot to do with his disinterest that he's showing to even be there in Chicago right now. I just don't feel like he's into it. And then his yards per target down 2 full yards, not what you want to see in a guy of Allen Robinson's stature. So for fantasy, I don't think you can cut him. His resume is just too solid, and his history with QBs gives me enough hope that something will click eventually. It just hasn't been great at all by any means so far this year. And you can't trade him because his value is too low for what he should be and could be. He's only 28 years old and could be traded this week, or at the very least will certainly be gone next year. So for me, regardless of dynasty or redraft, he's a hold, and he's on my bench for the time being. If he's traded, he's going to be used better than he is now, regardless of who or what team that is. I think you're kind of stuck with him on your bench until something happens. But if you're willing to cut him for a guy like Rashad Bateman in redraft, I wouldn't say that I fault you for that. If he's your only option to cut, maybe you have a pretty loaded wide receiving core and you're just kind of tired of dealing with the headache that comes with him, I would be willing to do that for a guy like Bateman, because I feel like Bateman is going to be a very, very solid option moving forward. So, boys, appreciate the question. It is very unsettling seeing how he has been used and seeing how he's been performing so far this year. Has not been great. I think he only has one game over 10 PPR points start the year, and that's not what you were looking for when you drafted Allen Robinson. I know that's not what I was looking for when I drafted him. He was my wide receiver 2 in a lot of leagues, even my wide receiver 1 in some leagues where I maybe went running back heavy, or super flex leagues where I went quarterback and running back heavy to start. So, yeah, it hasn't been great. I still would not cut him, because the moment you do cut him, somebody will pick him up for a lesser piece. And if he does pop, then you gave him away for nothing, as opposed to trading him for at least something. If you're absolutely set on getting rid of him, I would at least try to trade him to see if you can get some value for him. But I personally would not cut him. At Jason Quinn 1992 on Twitter, thoughts on Mike Davis rest of the season, 2 QB, half PPR, and said he needs to drop 1 for waivers between Tony Pollard, Rashad Bateman, Latavius Murray, Mike Davis, and Geno Smith. And I was looking at your team, Jason, because you sent the screenshot of the team on Twitter. You already have Russell Wilson on your IR. And with Seattle on bye following this week, and your 2 current starters being Tannehill and Hurts, I'm actually fine with dropping Geno. Hurts and Tannehill don't have buys until the last 2 weeks of the year, and even if Watson is traded to Philly, Hurts would likely be traded as well, and likely would be the starter that week, assuming it happens early enough in the week where he's able to get acclimated with the playbook enough to be the starter. Bateman is off limits for me. Like I said before, I think he's going to be very viable this year for the rest of the season as long as he stays healthy. Lamar Jackson seems to like him. I'm holding him given what we've seen from him in the first 2 weeks. He's averaging 1.5 points per target already, and he's only 2 games in. There's really no way I'm dropping him for anybody on waivers currently. And for me, the easy answer is Latavius Murray. Davis is still a starting running back, and last week was the first week all season that he didn't see double-digit opportunities. Plus, he's already had his bye week, so that's no longer a concern for him. Murray's only seen 3 games with double-digit opportunities, and Baltimore seems inclined to use multiple backs plus Lamar in the run game. So for me, I'd be dropping him for a guy like Kenny Gamewell if you can get him. It all really depends on who your waiver targets are for the week, but Geno and Murray are the 2 guys that I'm most willing to drop from your team, especially with having Hurts and Tannehill in line to be in your lineup with Russell Wilson on IR for the time being. So I'm perfectly fine with doing that. I think Geno and Murray would be the 2 guys that I'd be willing to drop to find different pieces. And even if you wanted to try and look and see if you could get another quarterback, Tyrod Taylor's supposed to be coming back. Maybe he's available on waivers. I know it's a 2 QB league, so I'm sure a lot of the potential starters are going to be on rosters already. But if somebody like Tyrod Taylor is available, I'd be willing to go pick him up for Geno. If you're kind of worried about the whole Jalen Hurts thing, that's something that I'd be willing to do. Like I said, I'm not sure if that's an option for you, but if he is available, that's that's another route that you could take if you wanted to pick another quarterback up. So kind of on to what happened this past week and guys coming off of injuries or getting ready to come off of injuries, maybe guys that got injured this week. I just want to touch on all the major ones that I was able to find. There might be some that I'm missing, so I apologize if there is. But I'll start with quarterbacks and Zach Wilson. Obviously, he goes down with a right knee PCL sprain, out 2 to 4 weeks. Laying on his right knee Sunday while being tackled on a pass attempt. The PCL helps in the stability of the knee. It's not as serious as an ACL injury, but an IR stint is on the table for just his franchise quarterback. The Jets just traded for Joe Flacco, I believe, yesterday afternoon. He's likely going to be the starter moving forward, barring any injury. He was there last year, obviously. I believe it was last year. But outside of a desperation play in 2 QB leagues, I don't think he's worth starting. And with only 2 teams being on bye this week, I don't think he'd be a viable option. Trey Lance obviously missed last week. Coaching staff seems really unsure about him returning this week against the Bears. I'd expect him to sit this week, and if he's going to start, I think he'd be returning the following week against Arizona, where they're going to need his rushing upside to keep Arizona's defense honest. I think that the coaching staff in San Francisco wants to have him be the starter. I feel like they recognize that he offers more for that offense in general, whether it be with his arm or with his legs. I feel like their offense has just opened up more, and the emergence of Elijah Mitchell will help take a lot of that pressure off of Trey Lance because they have that running back that's able to just kind of help him out a little bit. So I would expect Trey to be the starter once he comes back, but I could be wrong. Never really know with a Kyle Shanahan team. That's just my opinion where he's at. Patrick Mahomes left extremely late in the fourth quarter of a terrible game for not only him, but the Chiefs in general against Tennessee last week. Did clear concussion protocol after the game. He's going to start on Monday night. I wouldn't be concerned about him starting, but it hasn't looked good for him through the first 6 weeks. I think he's got 6 straight games with an interception. And I said on the live show that team is still averaging 30 points a game, and despite not really being themselves, but I don't know. I can't say that I trust it. I can't say that he's the locked-in QB 1 or 2 for this week. It hasn't, like I said, it hasn't been great, but it's still Patrick Mahomes. You're still starting him regardless of your format or anything like that. You're still, unless you have Kyler Murray on your team, or Josh Allen, I think those are probably the only 2 that I'd be willing to start over him definitively. So unless you have one of those 2 guys in a 1-2 QB or a 1 QB league, and you somehow have him and one of those 2 guys, he's in your lineup. No questions asked, really. Baker Mayfield, despite him saying that he would play on Thursday, he ended up missing Thursday's game. Isn't going to play until he's able to show doctors he's fully healthy and can protect himself. Draws a tough matchup on Halloween with the Steelers. And until we see more practice reports or anything like that this week, I would expect Case Keenum to get another start. And he's probably not viable either, given their receiver injuries and just their lack of overall explosive playmakers. It's really, Nick Chubb is back as well, so I expect them to lean heavily on the ground game. And Dearness Johnson was a very solid surprise for many last week, so I would expect them to lean on the ground quite a bit. So Case Keenum would be off the table for me. Even Baker Mayfield, if he started, unless you're in a desperate spot in 2 QB leagues, I would not be starting Baker Mayfield either if he played. Dak Prescott suffered a strained calf at the end of the game in week 6. Cowboys were on a bye last week, and he didn't practice yesterday, but all indications are that he will be ready to go Sunday against the Vikings. So again, he's in your lineup if he is ready to go. Tyrod Taylor expected to return to practice this week. David Culley said he will be the starter when he is healthy and ready to go. offense looks significantly better with him in the lineup. So if he does return this week, I think Brandon Cooks and rookie Nico Collins would receive a pretty significant bump up. Although Brandon Cooks has still been solid, obviously Tyrod Taylor is a better quarterback than Davis Mills. I think he proved that. Was it last week, the week before? So yeah, if he's there, I think he's a solid option in 2 QB league, solid QB2. On to running backs, Saquon Barkley. Joe Judge indicated that Barkley would be returning to practice this week, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's limited in practice all week. I think they're going to want to wait and see if Barkley can get at least one full practice in between now and Sunday, and I think he's going to need that in order to play. Devontae Booker has been viable in Barkley's absence, and I would think they give him one more week to get fully healthy, given the rush of injuries on the offensive side of the ball. But if he does play, obviously you're going to start him as well. Probably looking at a snap count if he does play. So might want to temper expectations, but it's still Saquon Barkley, so you're going to have him in your lineup. Obviously, if you have better options, like I said with Baker Mayfield or Patrick Mahomes, if you got a couple of studs that you can start in front of him, obviously you do that. But if he was drafted as your RB1, you're gonna want to play him. You're gonna have to play him. Nick Chubb practiced yesterday after not playing on Thursday night. Looks like he's ready to play, and with Hunt being on IR, Chubb is locked in as a top 5 option until Hunt returns at the very least for me. Like I said with the Baker Mayfield stuff, if he plays, they're gonna lean on him a ton. I know Steelers are relatively tough against the run, but Nick Chubb is a different animal, and talent always wins out. So like I said, I think Chubb is locked in as a top 5 option until Hunt returns, because he's going to see the majority of the third down work as well, even with guys like Dimitri Felton in there. I wouldn't be surprised if they do sprinkle in Dearness Johnson and Felton still, but Chubb is just so good and so efficient that I expect him to be a top 5 option. Miles Sanders, right ankle sprain, out 1 to 3 weeks, was ruled out relatively quickly, but it's being considered more of a mild sprain as opposed to what Saquon Barkley suffered. He hasn't officially been ruled out for Week 8 against the Lions, but I sincerely doubt that he plays. Kenny Gamewell would be the add here, but if you're in a really deep league and need some running back help, Boston Scott is a solid add. They essentially split backfield work after the injury to Sanders, with Gamewell getting 22 touches and Gamewell getting 22 snaps and Scott getting 20, but Scott had more carries and got some goal line work in that stretch, while Gamewell was primarily a pass-catching back. But we've seen Gamewell have goal line work even with Sanders in the lineup, so Gamewell is still the guy to add. I think this week with only 2 guys being on bye, I think he's the consensus number one waiver target right now. Especially in PPR leagues, he's my number 1 waiver claim. Josh Jacobs suffered a chest injury. Raiders are on a bye this week, and it's expected he will be back in time for Week 9. I wouldn't do anything in terms of Kenyon Drake or Peyton Barber. Peyton Barber was active last week and wasn't much of anything. I don't think this new coaching staff is willing to give him the run that John Gruden was, so I wouldn't be willing to spend any fab on either of those guys if they're available. But if you want to add them as a free ad, maybe you miss out on some waiver claims and you know you're going to have some bye week struggles for next week and you want to take the chance on them, go ahead. But I would advise against it personally. Then we got Malcolm Brown, exited the Week 7 loss with a quad injury. He's been put on IR and will miss at least 3 weeks, obviously. Myles Gaskin was already the most consistent back in terms of snap share, so I don't think much changes other than Gaskin and Savon Ahmed get a little bit more of a run. Miami gets Buffalo this week, and in Week 2, they ran the ball 20 times in a blowout loss, and Gaskin was the only back to see double-digit opportunities in that game. I would expect more of the same. He's likely a volume volume-based flex play in a tough matchup against Buffalo. And I say flex play because they have been super tough against running backs so far this year. Take out the Derrick Henry game because hardly anybody stops Derrick Henry. I know the Chiefs just did this past week, but they were just blown out of the water, and that game wasn't even close. So I'm on to scratch that one. Derrick Henry shows up to play every single week, and he's tough to stop. So I'm not going to fault Buffalo for that one. So Gaskin is a volume-based flex play for me, and Ahmed is a flex option in super, super deep leagues. Damie Brown suffered a knee sprain. He's considered week to week. He struggled with knee injuries essentially all year. MRI was negative in terms of structural damage, so the belief is that it is just a mild sprain. Would not be surprised at all if he's inactive for week 8 against a tough Broncos secondary, with Washington coming up on their bye in week 9. So I would not be surprised if he does not play in this one. He hasn't really been fantasy relevant anyways. I feel like Adam Humphries just kind of gets a slight bump. Maybe Ricky Seals-Jones gets a slight bump, and Terry McLaurin's still Terry McLaurin, so you're still starting him regardless, and doesn't affect him hardly at all. And OBJ, he's been able to play through that AC joint that he's been suffering through so far since he came back. He's going to be on the injury report because I don't expect him to practice at all. In terms of a full participation, I'm probably going to be limited all week, but I think he's still going to be playing. Unfortunately, he seems to be a flex option at this point at best, currently, given how he's played and just the uncertainty at quarterback. Having Case Keenum as your quarterback will do that. Jarvis Landry saw a ton of targets in his limited time that he had last week, so I would expect OBJ to play, but you should know that you're tempering expectations at this point for him. Michael Gallup, Cowboys officially have 3 weeks to activate him off IR. He's supposed to practice this week, but I would be a little surprised if he did play. Although if you're needing wide receiver help for week 9, though, I would be adding Gallup because I think that's when he returns. And if he returns this week, he's not going to be fully ready to go. And I think week 9 would be the week that he's actually able to get a full run in. It's unlikely that it changes the offense all that much. But in a year where we've seen a lot of injuries and a lot of guys go down and a lot of guys being consistent on Robinson, I think Gallup is a solid add, especially in 12-team or deeper leagues, because of the offense that he's playing. And having Dak Prescott as his quarterback, we've seen Cedric Wilson not be necessarily viable, but he's been effective. And I think Gallup's a better receiver than he is. And we saw at the beginning of the year where when Gallup was playing that he was extremely involved in week 1. So I would definitely put my bid in for Gallup if I have the roster space for him to sit this week. And then, like I said, week 9 is a pretty large bye week as well. It's not as bad as week 7, but week 9 is a pretty significant bye week as well. So if you need the help, Gallup wouldn't be a bad option to add at the end of your bench. Sit him this week, and hopefully next week he'll be fully healthy, ready to go. Kenny Galladay, he has missed the last few weeks after hyperextending his knee, and Joe Judge said there's a chance he could practice tomorrow, but given his injury history, I'm not sure Galladay will be a full go come week 8. The Giants need the playmakers. They need him on the field, but I don't expect them to rush him back if he isn't fully healthy. Like I said, given his injury history, I would be surprised if he's a full go. But you never know. I don't know if I know they get the Chiefs this week, I believe, and that is a great matchup. So if he does return, I think you're fine starting him if you're willing to take the risk of re-aggravation or just him getting hurt again with another injury. But if you need him and they declare him active, I think this is a solid matchup for him to be in. But he also plays on Monday night, if I'm not mistaken. So you got to kind of be mindful of that. If you have better options, more safe options, I would likely lean that way. And if he does pop off this week, coming off the injury, you just kind of take that. It just kind of happens, especially this year. We've seen it happen quite a bit where guys weren't supposed to do much and they end up popping off. So if you can start him and he's active, I think he's fine. If you have better options for this week, I would sit him and wait and see what happens this week. Jerry Judy, my boy, is expected to return this week. Been really high on Jerry Judy all offseason, including at the beginning of the year. He's now missed over a month due to a high ankle sprain, but is expected to return. Broncos offense has really struggled as of late. And I think Judy will provide a pretty solid boost. Obviously, if he does return, Tim Patrick is likely relegated to the fourth passing option at best behind Judy, Sutton, and Fant. I personally wouldn't drop him, though, if you don't need to, just in case another one of these receivers goes down. But I'm okay dropping him for other pieces if you need to. If you need to drop him for Kenny Gainwell or Rashad Bateman, or I don't even know if I would drop him for Gallup, to be honest with you, just because of the offense. But like I said, if you absolutely have to drop somebody, he's very much droppable, especially in 10-team leagues. Jarvis Landry, we mentioned OBJ. Landry missed practice on Monday after he limped off the field on Thursday, but he did come back and finish that game. This is just a re-aggravation of the MCL. But given how Landry has been throughout his career, I would expect him to play. He had 8 targets in last week's win, despite leaving the game, like I said, but he did finish. So I expect him to play. Him finishing the game kind of solidifies that. I wouldn't expect him to finish the game and then miss next week's game. I can't imagine injury getting any worse. But just keep an eye on it. If the injury report says that he suffers a setback, or maybe he has some swelling or anything like that on Tuesday or tomorrow in practice, maybe look for a different option if you're planning on using him. But I think he'll be fine. I think he'll be targeted just as much, if not more, than he was last week. So I think he's a solid flex option in PPR leagues. And then one of the more surprising inactives for week 7, right along with Ramondre Stevenson being a healthy scratch for New England, was Darren Waller. Waller missed Sunday's game after he got tripped during Friday's practice by a teammate. The Raiders are on a bye this week, so I would expect Waller to be a full go come week 9. They said he just kind of tweaked his ankle a little bit. So I wouldn't be overly concerned with Darren Waller coming up, but if you were paying attention to inactives early in the day Sunday, I personally pivoted off of him and went to Foster Moreau. Obviously that worked out. He ended up scoring a touchdown, had a pretty solid day. I think he scored 18 PPR points. So you likely already have a replacement for him, but if that person that you replaced him with was just a streaming option and just a guy that you needed for that week and you don't need him here, I think you're fine to drop him and be able to play Waller, because like I said, you weren't going to play him this week anyways because they're on a bye. So if you have Waller, I think he's fine for week 9. Obviously, you weren't going to play him week 8, so you should already have a backup option for him there. If you don't, guys like CJ Uzama are solid options. I doubt a guy like Mike Gesicki is available. I doubt Ricky Seals-Jones is still available. Zach Ertz, highly doubt he's available. But CJ Uzama is a solid option. Pat Freiermuth might be a solid option this week as he starts to get a little bit more involved with that Pittsburgh offense. So just a couple of names to consider if you're looking to stream the tight end position for week 8 if you do have Waller or any of these other guys that are on bye. In terms of waiver targets, we already talked about it for the most part while I was going through the injuries. Kenny Gainwell is the number 1 option. Go back and look. I've been saying that he should have been added before the Miles Sanders injury. I've been saying it for a couple weeks now. But now he's just going to be a lot more expensive for you than he was 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. So I'm willing to spend at least half my remaining fab on him, if not all of it, depending on where I'm at in the standings or where I'm at in terms of my running back health. He's going to be involved quite a bit. They have a solid matchup against Detroit on Sunday, so I would be all over Kenny Gamewell. I'd be doing whatever I needed to do in order to acquire him in terms of fab. He's already taken in a lot of my leagues that I'm in. He was available in a couple redraft leagues. I obviously put my claim in, but I don't think I'll get him because I'm lower on the lower on the priority list. So highly doubt I get him, but if you are in a fab league or you have the number one waiver wire priority, I would definitely be adding Kenny Gamewell if he is available. Like I mentioned with the Waller news a second ago, CJ Uzomah is a solid streaming ad this week for tight ends if you need the help. Trying to think of who else would be needed this week. Daniel Jones is a solid QB streaming option this week against Kansas City. I know he wasn't great last week. If I remember correctly, he threw another 4 interceptions or something along those lines. Everything of the week before, so I'm sorry if I misspoke there, but he is a solid option against Kansas City. Kansas City's obviously had a lot of struggles so far this year in terms of their defensive abilities. That was very evident in Sunday's loss to Tennessee. So, like I said, he's a solid option. It was two weeks ago. He threw 3 interceptions. Last week he was actually pretty solid, but he only threw for 203 yards. And that's Daniel Jones I'm speaking about. But, hopefully you guys got through week 7 okay. If you guys have any questions or concerns, comments, trade questions, anything like that, please feel free to message me on Twitter. You can find me on Twitter at Mackie_FFB. If we don't have any more questions or anything like that, I'll probably just end the show for the day. Appreciate you guys tuning in. Appreciate you guys listening. Follow the Fantasy Football Playmakers on Twitter at FF Playmakers. We are on YouTube as well at Fantasy Football Playmakers podcast, and on Twitch if you're into that type of thing, on Twitch at Fantasy Playmakers. So until Sunday, we'll be doing that live show. Jeremy will be back on Sunday. Really missed his input, to be honest with you. I know I was talking to him the other day, and he said that he really missed the States. I don't know why, but he kind of said it was just kind of the same thing over and over again for him. So excited to have him back, excited to get him back into the show and get things kind of back to normal. Dan was great. I know Dan really well personally, and I just kind of Dan Park on Twitter at ParkFFB. If you don't follow him, go give him a follow. He was great filling in for Jeremy. I was picking on him because I know him personally, so I was just he said, "Thank you. Hey, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. If you guys ever need anybody on, let me know." And I'm like, "Nah, you suck. Like, don't come back." And he's just a good guy. He's a great addition to the show for the couple weeks that he was on Sundays. But like I said, really excited to have Jeremy back. He's kind of what makes this show run as relatively smoothly as it does. It's really hard to talk on here without a person, by the way. I don't know if anybody has ever tried this before, but it is not easy. Keep saying, got a comment on YouTube, Tamian. I'm not going to try to pronounce your last name. I'm sorry. JJ Higgins and Jacobs for Ridley, Johnson, and Dalvin Cook. I have Eckler, Kamara, Henderson, Hill, Lamb, AB, AJ Brown. Don't need QB and tight end. JJ is my wide receiver 2 right now. Is it worth the trade? This guy just wants Justin Jefferson. I'm assuming that's who JJ is, Justin Jefferson. Calvin Ridley. I'm not quite sure who the Johnson is, though. If you could fill me in on that. Is it Deontay? If it's I don't know, I guess I need just a little bit more context. If it's okay, it's Deontay Johnson. Is it PPR? Is it standard, dynasty, redraft? Actually, actually I don't even think that matters. I think I'm taking that no matter what. And you say it is PPR, so I think I'm taking that no matter what. To be honest with you, Ridley, Dalvin Cook, and JJ are in the same tier for me. It's just Dalvin is getting up in that age where his value starts to take a hit in terms of running backs. But I think that trade's worth it. Deontay is a target monster. Calvin Ridley is going to bounce back. I think he's going to be fine rest of the year. Kyle Pitts is coming along. The offense should open up a little bit more. Matt Ryan seems to be taking a little bit more control of that offense, getting a little bit better handle on that Arthur Smith offense. So I think his time is coming. T. Higgins, he's firmly number 2 behind Chase. Deontay and Calvin Ridley are both wide receiver 1s on their team, unless you want to consider Kyle Pitts the wide receiver 1, but that's really to be determined, to be honest with you. Really just came back this past week. Didn't really perform all that great, but I still have really high hopes for him. I think he's still going to finish from this point on. I still think he's still a wide receiver 1. Deontay Johnson, like I said, super high target share. He's Ben's favorite target, so I'm perfectly fine with that trade. Obviously, you upgrade huge with Jacobs, and having a lineup with Cook, Eckler, and Kamara is just unfair. And you already have, I'm assuming that's Tyreek Hill, and then CeeDee Lamb, Antonio Brown, and AJ Brown. Yeah, that's a smash. Except for me, I'd be more than willing to do that. I wouldn't even really think twice about it, to be honest with you. Yeah, Damien, I would definitely take that deal. But all right, if that's the only question we got, you're very welcome. Thanks for coming on. Appreciate it. But yeah, I think I'm gonna end the show here. 10 after 9. Gotta get up. My son unfortunately has to quarantine again for the second time in 2 weeks because he came in close contact with somebody that has COVID. So I have to stay home. My work is much more forgiving than my wife's work. So, which is odd because she works at a daycare. You would think that they would be willing to let her take some time off and worry about the kids. But it is what it is. My work is very understanding. I really appreciate them. So thank you guys for coming on. Like I said, you can find me on Twitter at Mackie_FFB. Be welcoming back Jeremy back Sunday for the live show. So be sure to tune in for that. And until next time, I will see you later.